Shifting focus to another very interesting topic that we have for you. It was actually a big news story that emerged yesterday, and we believed it deserved prime time, that it should be talked about. We've often spoken about the LGBTQ community. We had exhaustive debates around the time that Section 377 was being hotly contested in the courtrooms of our country. But it is now time to move one step further. It is now time to discuss more about the community's inclusion, about the country's sensitization on how to handle, how to talk, how to behave, what rules apply, how do you make them more included in every aspect of our lives. And that is what I want to talk tonight. Why have I picked this day? Because of the news that came in yesterday. And very progressive and a landmark order issued by the Madras High Court. The complaint was very simple, viewers. The complaint actually was filed by a couple, two women, a lesbian couple, who are in a relationship. Their parents didn't agree. Their parents were not convinced, were not backing this relationship. So this couple left home and moved cities. They went from one city to the other. The parents went to the police, filed missing complaints, got FIRs to be registered. The police then went around looking for this lesbian couple. They landed at their place. They asked them many questions. And this whole thing became a big task and a big harassment system process for the couple. These are things we often speak about when we talk about the so-called love jihad cases that emerge from Uttar Pradesh. It's become a tool of harassment for couples. Parents also use this by going to the police and filing a complaint. So this couple actually then moved to the Madras High Court seeking protection from harassment, from the way the police was behaving, the questions that they were asking from society in general. Instead of just giving it a normal hearing and passing a verdict basis what the law exists and what should be done, Justice Anand Venkatesh took a very unusual, extremely impressive route. He first decided to deal with his own prejudices. He first decided to make himself aware, understand a little bit more about lesbians, about gays, homosexuals, transgenders, what they go through, who they are, why they are the way they are, where they come from, their emotions, their sentiments, to understand all of this before he ruled on this case. He actually went through counseling sessions, interacted with the LGBTQ community members to get insights before passing this verdict. And then he came out with a series of measures that must be taken at every level, from sensitization of the police to support from the government and the district legal services for such couples or people who need, from the LGBTQ community who need help, to steps that need to be taken by the governments for more inclusion and for more sensitization. It's an exhaustive order. It's an insightful order into a judge's journey of tackling his own ignorance and prejudice, understanding a part of this world that he never knew about, and he was brought up thinking different things about homosexuals, and then to come up with a progressive order for this community. Let's talk about this a little more. Let's talk about what the judge said and how do we go about such kind of a sensitization plan. I say good evening to Manu Sundaram, spokesperson for DMK, also the lawyer for the petitioners in this case. Rahul Ishu, a social activist, joins us this evening. Kalki Subramaniam, transgender rights activist, founder for the Saudhari Foundation, with me this evening. Karuna Nandi, senior advocate with the Supreme Court. Nishtha Nishant, scientific researcher and an equal rights activist, with us this evening as well. Thank you all for joining. Manu, I want to start off with you. I'm sure even for the petitioners, it would have been a surprise to see that a judge actually wanted to know a lot more before simply looking into the legal aspects of it.
Tanvi, more than the petitioners, I think the entire legal fraternity itself found this to be a fairly refreshing and new and perhaps a novel approach for reasons that you've explained quite well. But to add to what you've said in your introduction, Tanvi, if I may, the judgment that was passed yesterday, the detailed guidelines, I think has tried to do something more than just what we expected from the High Court when we sought police protection and sought protection from harassment. It has tried to address the difference that continues to exist today between the law of the land and what society thinks of the law and how society perceives the law to be. I say this very consciously because the law of the land is very clear. After the famous judgment in the Navdeep Singh Johar case, the Supreme Court has clearly said that same sex and queer relationships are not barred. However, in society, that's not the understanding. There are serious implications when same sex couples or queer couples engage in relationships or decide to do anything about their relationships. So, therefore, the judge in this case was very cognizant of this huge divide that exists between what society thinks is the law and what the law is. So, therefore, he has tried to, in my opinion, through these exhaustive guidelines, address some of the problems that society has developed and society has not let go of in the last few years. And these include serious problems around stigmatization of queer community, ostracization, you know, projecting our heteronormative understanding of what sex or sexual orientation should be, having a very closed minded approach to gender and how binary the gender should be. So, therefore, as you rightly said, he has taken a very different approach. I think it is one that not only the petitioners, but even lawyers who are experienced have found this to be very refreshing. And perhaps this also charts a new course in judicial thinking for another reason, Tanvi, and if I may just quickly explain that as well. The order passed yesterday also records his sessions with the psychologist, the judge's sessions with the psychologist and the counselor. So, therefore, for the first time in an order of the High Court, anywhere in the country, in my opinion, we have detailed records as to what sexual orientation is, what sexual preference is, what gender means, what heteronormativity means. So, these are all terms which I think for the first time, lawyers such as myself and younger lawyers will find instructive and find very helpful when we try to understand issues faced by the queer community. So, not just for this case, but I think a future generations of lawyers and students of law will also find this to be a great sort of referencer to understand queer communities' issues.
Yeah, you know, two very important aspects that you've highlighted, and so we'll take them one by one. And the first one, Karuna, and I come to you on that as well, is leading by example about sensitization of the judiciary itself, of the judges across the country, the lawyers and the rest of the staff. And I think this is a great example that others can follow because it's needed. Sensitization is not just something that's required within the police force or elsewhere.
First, I want to congratulate Manu and his team because I think it's really important for these cases to be taken to court, right? And and mostly we do these cases pro bono because a lot of the people who need the representation and who need really excellent representation don't have the money. Also, congratulations to the judge. Why do I think that this is an extremely important judgment? Because of the way that the veil has been taken off from the myth of judicial neutrality. Right? There is a way in which I think courts are supposed to be neutral, but therefore we also then perpetuate the idea of neutrality and perpetuate the myth of neutrality. Now, if you look at some of the judgments that came in that were examined in the Aparna Bhatt judgment by Justice Ravindra Bhatt and his colleagues on the bench, it was found that a lot of those judgments came from a extremely heteropatriarchal perspective, right? So they were saying, I mean, there were rape judgments that where they wanted to the rapist to tie a rakhi. There were rape judgments where it was said that the woman is habituated to sexual intercourse or that she didn't do a medical test and therefore it wasn't rape. For example, it's completely against the law. Now, you had a bench of Savarna Hindu men who set this right. Right? However, I think what this judgment does is that it looks at, you know, it's a very post-modern idea to deconstruct who we are, where we are located, and then to tell the world and be explicit about where we are located, and then to do the work to bring ourselves up to the level of our constitutional calling and the task that we have, which is to meet the demands of equality in the Constitution.
Correct.
Having said that, there are a couple of difficulties, right? One is that what if a judge in a different position decides to have conversations that are ex parte, you know, have conversations that are not, that the other side doesn't have the opportunity to respond to, right? What if a judge has these sorts of going in a particular direction that doesn't meet the sort of very stringent requirements of constitutional equality, you know? But I think that this judge is actually a pioneer, and he's doing the work that the National Judicial Academy should have been doing. And I've had the honor of conducting 2 workshops at the National Judicial Academy. And I think that this is the work that actually should be taken on by the National Judicial Academy, and it's the sort of thing, and the state judicial academies. And this is what he himself is saying.
Yes, and rather than being institutionalized where people should go through that kind of sensitization, he's taken it upon himself to undergo that before he decides on this case. I think you raise an extremely important point. Nishtha, do come in on this because it's applicable to everybody. We just expect that our judges would be able to rise above their own, pre-decided notions or their own mindset or prejudice to be able to decide on cases. It doesn't always happen, but in this case, the judge did ensure that he is able to first tackle that before he passes this order, and that's so refreshing, like Manu put it.
Absolutely. Well, it is very important to do the ground research before even giving any kind of verdict, and ensuring that justice has been given to the person who is needing it. And creating awareness, it will only happen if we are taking a positive step towards bringing a change that we want to see in society. And this particular action is very, very appreciable. And I really respect this person for taking steps to know more about the community and ensuring that people are getting what they deserve. I think it is more important, not just for the judges, but for every official to know about the LGBTQI plus community and ensure that there is no discrimination happening towards any human being, no matter whichever background they come from, whatever area they belong to. It is important to treat every person as a primary.
So, and I wanted you on this conversation before I go to Kalki and Rahul, Nishtha, because while judiciary is one aspect where we need sensitization as well, the most important one I feel right now is the police department. Because when you're in trouble, like anybody else, and you turn towards the police force for help, it doesn't help if they don't understand where you're coming from and why it's a big problem for you, and or how they handle your case. I mean, I'm something that I know that you yourself have experienced.
Absolutely. Well, back then it was quite difficult to make people understand about your identity. But I see that there is a change happening with the police force as well, where awareness programs are created to make the force sensitize about how to deal with people who belong to the queer community with enough sensitization and not discrimination. I faced difficulties because there was no awareness created. But now there are steps taken by the forces where individuals like me walk in and interact with the force, ensure that they get to know about the community, and we are looked as human beings and not as aliens as was earlier. So there is a change happening, and I see that there is enough work that needs to be done, which is in progress, and things will become better, and this space would be enough sensitized towards the queer community.
So let's look at some of the things that the Madras High Court has ordered. That, you know, when police, even if you get a complaint and you look into it and you understand what the situation is, you must close this case, you know, and close the missing case without harassment being the operative part. The government must enlist NGOs with expertise on such cases. The details of the NGOs must be shared on official websites. NGOs to provide aggregate data to government annually. Then you must bring in the district legal services to support and address the issues of the community itself, make suitable changes in the existing homestays, shelters, to include really, you know, all genders in that shelter itself, take measures to channelize the community back into mainstream. While it does sound good, Kalki, will it really be helpful in bringing about the change, some of these guidelines that the High Court has now brought about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think whatever we have done for the past 15 years as activism, I now see all that, the results happening, especially the judge, the justice, Anand Venkatesh, not only his verdict and suggestions were amazingly great and made this Pride Month, in spite of all the coronavirus crisis, the LGBT community is jubilant today and yesterday because of the verdict. In so many ways, I think this is a pioneering judgment, and it's a way, definitely a way forward for the establishment of equality and human rights in the country. And particularly, what is amazing for me is how the judge has actually touched at each and every point where LGBT people are vulnerable to violence, hatred, and, you know, especially when we talk about schools, the teenagers. I, as a teenager, was bullied, physically abused, psychologically abused, and I've gone through, I've lost basically a lot of my childhood memories are all about that. Like me, hundreds and thousands of children who are gender and non-conforming and transgender, they are faced with this situation. And also, if you look at majority of the people in the public who are begging and doing sex work today, these are all school dropouts and unable to continue school. So the primarily educating our education system itself, educating our educators, is one of the most important steps that has to be done by the government, by the Ministry of Education, in the center as well as in the state. And particularly Justice Anand Venkatesh has emphasized that, which makes me happy. Because activists like me, we have been talking about bringing educational curriculum in the school on LGBTQI human rights, on gender and sexuality. For the past 15 years, we've been talking about it. And little has been done about it in our educational system. So the verdict about introducing education on LGBT rights, LGBT issues in schools and colleges is an essential part, which will definitely reduce the violence against the LGBTQI community and definitely the transgender and gender non-conforming. Another point about this is the police officers who have to be sensitized. You see, majority of the trans people today are poor, and they're all, many of them are working as sex workers, and many of them do begging. And it's always them who are vulnerable and become subjects of violence. I mean, the police have no respect, basically, for transgender people, because I don't blame them, but they are not sensitized enough. Neither did they get sensitized at school, in college, nor did they get sensitized in their police academy, you see. And still they don't have many opportunities because such sessions are not conducted. I believe 10 years ago, actually, a series of such workshops were conducted in the DMK regime 10 years ago, but 12 years ago, yeah. But after that, nothing happened at all. The police officers, right from DIG, DGP, SP to the constable, none of them were actually sensitized. So still the community has gone through a lot of, have to go through a lot of struggles. The police, we don't expect the police to be sympathetic towards us. We just expect empathy and the right treatment. Treat us as humans, that's all. And talking about Justice Anand Venkatesh being so sensitive to this issue, I'm amazed. At the same time, I'm happy because for many years we have been doing these sensitization programs at the Madras Judicial Academy and also at Bhopal in the Indian Judicial Academy. And I see that the judge's sensitive verdict is actually a result of all that.
Yes. You know, and I actually appreciate the honesty that he's also written about it in the order itself. It was, and he had no qualms in accepting where he stood, where he came from, what he thought, and how that has changed. You know, see, he went on to say, Rahul Ishwar, that I have never personally known homosexual persons. I would do what, you know, I would not know what to do had I come across anybody. He said that the society, my upbringing, always treated homosexual, gay, lesbians as anathema. Majority of the society would stand in the same position of ignorance and preconceived notions. And then he goes on to talk about how the petitioners describe their love and companionship in the exact terms as heterosexuals do, and that led to, you know, a deeper understanding. And he spent a lot of time, he calls the petitioners his gurus now, because he spent a lot of time talking to them, interacting them to get that understanding. Now, Ishwar, this is something I think our police force needs the most before anybody else. Otherwise, stories after stories of harassment, mocking them, passing lewd comments, dismissing, not taking them seriously. That's what we keep seeing, Rahul.
And Tanvi, two aspects are here. One, I don't think anybody in their right mind in India would be homophobic or appreciate anything like homophobic reactions. That's definitely a given. We should not have any kind of prejudice, discrimination against any people. Having said that, there might be a section of people who may be having a respectful disagreement with the entire paradigm, but we will take it for another occasion. Happy for the homosexual community for this verdict. It's no doubt that a person like Sri Anand Venkatesh has gone through he has tread a new path in exploring this. He has went to great lengths for doing this. I believe every section of society, whether they are right conservatives or whether they are left liberals, will agree with one or 2 points in this. One, there should not be any discrimination. There should not be any prejudice. There should be more sensitization. But there are larger debates regarding marriage, regarding other things that maybe we can keep for another day. And I would also like to comment on Karunanidhi ji for commenting upon the positive aspect of Savarna Hindu man. Usually they are always the villains. It is happy to see in national media that they are being portrayed in a good light. The core point here is, yes, more sensitization is needed, more respect and accepting is needed, more understanding is needed. That sensitization aspect, this verdict has clearly done, even though there may be a section of society, including the government of India, including our establishment, who would be still doubtful regarding how much we can stretch this line, especially in connection with marriage and the other institutions. But yes, the broader point.
Everybody who thinks it's stretching the line, Rahul Ishwar, should essentially undergo the same kind of an experience that Justice Anand Venkatesh did, and maybe they will think and know differently if they understood people from the community.
please correct me if I'm wrong, even this verdict, nothing connecting to marriage and the other thing is mentioned. I don't know. I have not seen the details of the verdict. I have only read it from the media. Yes, no discrimination, no homophobia, no any kind of prejudice. But there are questions that needs to be considered from a scientific, cultural point of view that can be a debate for another day. But
Okay.
yes, absolutely yes, more sensitization is needed.
Garuna Nandi wanted to say something. Yes.
I think it's very important to acknowledge that even if we don't understand or experience the reality of another person, rights are rights. Whether you think that the line is in a particular place, Mr. Ishwar, or whether, even a judge thinks that the line is in a particular place, I think should not and is not actually relevant. I think it's deeply laudable that the judge went through a particular transformation that I do think that National Judicial Academy and other judicial academies should make available. However, we've got to be 100% clear that when there is an experience we don't understand, the rights don't change. That if we don't, if you don't like gay marriage, don't marry a man.
No, you're right.
It's as simple as that.
So the
Don't
legal
marry
argument is
someone who's
completely the legal argument, the argument about rights for any individual of this country, any citizen of this country, is one aspect and an extremely important aspect. The other is changing how people think, how people perceive it, what people believe in, how they view it. And where I feel these exercises will be a lot more beneficial. We can make a law that says, okay, homosexuality is not a crime. But what happens when Kalki, the police on a daily basis still ill-treats you or doesn't take your law and order issues seriously?
Yeah, of course. That happens almost every day. Whenever trans people are going on the streets or on the train for begging, how they are treated by the railway police, or if they stand on the streets and at traffic signals for sex work, how they are treated. And the police has to be sensitized. Why are these people actually standing here? Of course, it's because they don't have a home. They have been shunned by their families. And so all these things about trans lives, LGBTQ lives, have to be sensitized to the police. It's actually high time we do it. We definitely have to do it. I'm very much hopeful that, at least in Tamil Nadu, the present DMK government will ensure that. I hope so.
Okay, I'm completely out of time, but I'm going to thank all of you. Yes, completely out of time, Karuna. My apologies, but we will have a lot more conversations as we go along. I think this has just gotten the ball rolling, a set of guidelines and measures that the governments must look into, but it's also brought back this issue into the limelight of the multiple cases of police harassment that actually takes place. In Kolkata, a 23-year-old from the LGBTQ community was beaten up by the police for no reason, verbally abused. A cop sexually harassed a trans woman, passed lewd comments and sexually laced comments, and no action was taken for the longest time. There are other examples that come in from cities. One, of course, is this example from Chennai. There was another example that came in from Delhi, where a transgender student alleged that the police didn't accept her sexual harassment complaint because she was not a woman. Lack of understanding, a big problem. Ignorance, then your prejudice. These are all hurdles that we will have to cross, we will have to address and do away with. And Justice Anand Venkatesh has actually led by example of understanding, undergoing interactions in sessions himself, including psychiatric educative sessions to understand the community he knew nothing about and only had some prejudices that he was taught to him in his childhood. He'd never interacted with a homosexual. But he made that attempt, he made that effort. And I believe every single member, to begin with from the judicial segment and the law enforcement segment must get themselves to do this for any real change to come about. Thank you so much for joining us on this conversation.